Britain's love affair with the company car. And your chance to be a rally driver with our Rally Quest 91 competition. Hello and welcome to this week's Top Gear. We're at the famous Prescott Hill Climb in Gloucestershire, one of the earliest special stages in the historic RAC rally, in an attempt to recreate some of the thunder and the power of earlier RAC events. Classic rallying, of course, has become immensely popular in the UK, so it's really only a matter of time before the RAC set out to create a classic version of its big modern annual event, and this is the result. So they've established a 4-day route starting in Bath, ending at Torbay in Devon, and on the way they pass through some of the classic special stages used from time to time over the 60-odd years of the RAC in its various forms. As for the field, it's a great collection of older cars with a sprinkling of older drivers, reliving some of the passionate moments of their youth. Well, more of this splendid rally later on. We shall be following it all the way to Torbay, but for the moment, back to modern times. Now, last year, when the sales figures in the UK of just about every car manufacturer were collapsing around their ears, the maker of this car, the Proton from Malaysia, achieved the highest growth rate of any car manufacturer. Now, that success was achieved, in part at least, because of their razor-blade competitive pricing. But Chris Goff has been looking into whether or not that success was justified.
Proton was first imported to Britain over 2 years ago from the Kuala Lumpur factory. Since its launch initially through the Lada dealer network, they've sold over 22,000 examples and become the fastest selling new make ever to enter the UK market. It's already overtaken some very well-known makes, and so far this year their sales are up 30%. That's in a market that's over 25% down on 1990. In February, the 200 dealers sold 1% of the total UK car market. So with most of the industry crying their eyes out over their profit figures, why are the all too few private buyers out there with ready cash choosing to buy a Proton? As the popular Japanese cars become ever more sophisticated and thus more expensive, there seems to be a gap opening up at the bottom of the market for people with 3- or 4-year-old Japanese cars who appreciate the reliability and the ease of driving, but who now can't afford to bridge the gap for a new Japanese car. This is the 1.5 SE Aerobac model at £9,000. It's the top of the range. You get power steering, central locking, electric windows and mirrors. Got a sunroof that winds back over the top of the roof as you adjust it. And you get a nice stereo cassette player. It's an easy car to drive. The waistline is low, so you've got generous glass area all round and visibility is very good. The dashboard is a bit plasticky, early Japanese style, and the switches are distributed rather haphazardly. In particular, the warning flashers are buried down here instead of being on a big red button where you can easily get to them. The shape is also rather reminiscent of Japanese cars a few years ago, perhaps rather angular styling compared to the smooth curves of today's corporate fashions. In any car, it's the little things that tend to annoy. In the Proton's case, it's a buzzer that goes off infuriatingly whenever you open a door and the key's left in the ignition. If the car was mine, I think I'd find the fuse responsible and simply chuck it away. Another extra on the Aerobac is the adjustable driver's seat, although you have to be very careful not to get your nails caught under the edge of the cushion as you operate it, unfortunately, as I did. Now, another surprising extra on the saloon version is a built-in aquarium. Now, apart from the fact that loose objects in the boot can fall into this well, it's also full of water. And it's not just down in this pocket. In the spare wheel well, there's evidence of an awful lot of water finding its way in. I don't know where it's coming from. Of course, maybe just water leaks on this particular car, but there is evidence that the fit and finish isn't quite up to Japanese standards. Under the bonnet, well-proven Mitsubishi power units, 1.3 and 1.5 litres. The 1.3 develops 77 brake horsepower, the 1.5 litre unit, 85. Despite the difference in power output, the performance of both cars is virtually identical. Maximum speeds around 103 miles an hour and 0 to 60 in 12.5 seconds. So why buy the bigger engine version? Well, the company says it's got much improved mid-range pulling power. A nice choice of trim material in the Proton, and quite nicely finished inside. With the driver's seat set for someone of my height, there's not an awful lot of legroom, and headroom distinctly restricted. On the Aerobac version, there's a split rear seat which folds forward for access on long loads. For the class of car, the accommodation inside is pretty good. I must find that fuse. The front seats are quite supportive and comfortable over long distances. Now, although all the 1.5s have power steering as standard, the 1.3 doesn't. The steering isn't very heavy and it's a nice rack and pinion system. This is the base car of the range, the 1.3 GL Saloon. At £6,800, it comes with a 24,000-mile major service interval, a 2-year 50,000-mile warranty, and a 6-year 60,000-mile powertrain guarantee. But it's shorter on equipment than the top-of-the-range model. It doesn't have electric windows. You have to adjust the mirror by hand. I say the mirror because there's only one. It's easy to see why the Proton has hit the mark in Britain. It's not a car which will appeal to the enthusiast. Performance, road holding and ride are all adequate rather than outstanding. However, it offers low running costs as well as the reliability of Japanese components. So the Proton 1.5 SE is the top-of-the-range model, and it offers excellent value for money, promising good reliability, and the second-hand values seem to be holding up well. Against it, it's rather characterless, the styling's a bit dated, and the layout of the controls rather haphazard. All Protons run on unleaded fuel, and catalysts will be available later.
Well, we've moved on now to Shelsley Wash Hill in the beautiful country west of Worcester. And one car whose image will forever be linked to the idea of rallying is, of course, the old Escort, because it so dominated the rallying scene in the 70s, although ironically it can't take part in the historic RAC because the Escort first came out in 68 and the cut-off date for the historic event is 65. But this particular car we've got here is a very famous member of the Escort breed, the RS 1600, of which about 1,000 were produced by Ford to homologate their rally cars. RS stands for Rally Sport. The 1600cc well-proven block was tweaked by Cosworth and given a 16-valve head, so pretty potent, about 115 brake horsepower. The other distinguishing features are these famous flared wheel arches and the funny little quarter bumpers on the front. But it was undoubtedly the success in rallying of the Escort that so boosted Ford's sales in the 70s. It gave them a powerful grip on the company car market. Very important because company car sales are about 1 in 2 of all cars sold in the UK. Now, because it's so well established in this country, we think the company car system is very much the norm. In fact, it's very much a British institution, nothing quite like it anywhere else in Europe. So the question is, what is the effect of this company car domination of the UK market on all us private car buyers? Well, it's a question that Jeremy Clarkson has been probing into.
Company car sales, as everyone knows, are good for vehicle makers and franchise dealers, but they're also a shot in the arm for staff morale. And they provide enormous financial benefits to the lucky employees who get the perk.
In a fairly stereotypical company, the office junior gets him or herself a Vauxhall Nova. The salesman out in the field has a 1.4 LX Escort. His boss back at base has a Cavalier, perhaps with a few choice extras. And just to remind them who they're all working for, the big cheese gets himself a Rover Sterling.
The company car has become an expectation in an increasingly broad range of jobs. So why has it entered so deeply into the national psychology?
I think it provides a status differential within an organisation. It's also a very tax-effective benefit. As a status differential, of course, it shows not only to your colleagues at work, but also to your family and friends what your status is. It may show people perhaps that you're slightly more upmarket than they are, so it's today's equivalent of the epaulette.
It's easy to see why employees lap up the cars. Currently, the driver of a 1.6-litre Cavalier doing more than 2,500 business miles a year and whose petrol bills are paid for by the company will be taxed as though the benefits are equivalent to an extra £2,800 in salary. That means just £700 a year in tax. But it actually costs nearly £5,000 a year to run a Cavalier GL. So the Chancellor needs to tax company cars much more heavily to stop them being a bargain. But the tax system can hit those who actually need their cars for work. Service engineers, for example, doing up to 18,000 genuine business miles a year, still have to pay tax on car use, even if their private mileage is very low. And the Inland Revenue is pursuing all sorts of other groups for tax too.
You can see the effect of Britain's company car culture in the showroom. Most employees choose their company car from a list of vehicles within a specified price band. They're called user choosers. Now, manufacturers, knowing that the odd £100 here or there isn't going to make that much difference, are keen to woo this particular breed, and to do that, they load the cars up with all sorts of profitable goodies. Take the 405, for example. All but the base models in Britain come with an electric sunshine roof as standard.
In France, the 605 doesn't even come with a stereo. And the same pattern's true for Ford, Vauxhall, Rover and just about everyone else in the fleet market. In Britain, the average car park has a higher proportion of bigger cars than anywhere else in Europe, with the inevitable exception of Germany. Even in America, there's been a trend toward more compact business vehicles, encouraged by company economy measures. But over here, status-conscious employees are wooed by larger cars so they can appear to retain a superior position in the company hierarchy. So the British market is full of very highly specified cars and has an inflated demand for relatively large ones. All this helps drive up list prices we're all asked to pay. But after pushing up the prices with all the goodies, the fleets demand discounts of up to 30%. Now, the private buyer can't hope to match these special deals, even with a good trade-in. So British consumers probably end up paying more for their cars than they would on the continent. There are also suggestions that the company car market influences garage bills. Servicing costs in franchise dealers, where the majority of customers are business drivers, are higher and tend to be geared to what the company market will pay. And since his employer is footing the bill, the company car driver is thought to be more tolerant of accepting unnecessary replacement items. Again, the price to the ordinary motorist is dictated by the company car.
If you pay for them yourself, you control the cost very much. You're trying to minimise the cost. If somebody else is paying, then you tend not to worry about the cost so much. Companies, subsidised, whatever, do tend to be far more expensive.
The same goes for petrol. Company car drivers often have their fuel paid for, and oil companies admit they're more likely to choose the station according to the free gifts on offer. The private motorist is possibly more influenced by price. And what about environmental damage? Company cars have larger engines and are less fuel efficient as a result. They're said to chuck out 15 million tonnes of carbon dioxide, and that sure has an effect on global warming.
Now, company car drivers not only buy a bigger car than they would if they were buying one themselves, but also choose the largest possible engine that their tax bracket allows. And then on top of all that, they drive them as much as possible to make up the mileage for their tax benefit. And against that sort of background, what possible hope does public transport or car sharing have?
And is there an effect on driving standards? If I were a company car driver, would I be more likely to indulge in socially irresponsible or even illegal behaviour? Yeah, well, super salesman, that's me. Yeah, hold on a minute. Will you get out of the way? Do company car drivers who don't have to pay for things like no claims bonuses drive as well as the rest of us? According to a recent survey, business drivers are more likely to break the law. Almost half of company car drivers thought it acceptable to drive at 90 miles an hour on motorways, compared with a quarter of ordinary drivers. Twice as many business drivers admitted driving too close. And according to the survey, they're also more likely to drink and drive on a regular basis.
So what's the future of company cars? Let's face it, it's a habit that's going to be pretty hard to break. They're an essential ingredient in modern-day business, they keep employees happy, and they're good for jobs in the car industry. Most observers believe there's going to be little negative effect in the budget, but that remains to be seen. One South London council, however, is doing its bit. They're offering 10 pence per mile as a bike allowance. Very environmentally sound, I'm sure, but on a day like today, they have got to be joking.
Well, for the past 4 days, the weather for the intrepid teams taking part in the historic RAC has been positively spring-like, very mild and very damp. Now, back in 1932, the very first RAC rally finished right here in Torbay, so it's only fitting that the historic event should finish here as well. And as you can see, the cars are going through their closing manoeuvres right now. Now, for much of the past 4 days and nights, Tony Mason has been shuffling his maps and his papers in the passenger seat of car number 1 with Roger Clark, and Tony now takes up the story.
The genteel streets of Georgian Bath are no strangers to rally cars, for the RAC Rally itself has been based here no less than 7 times during its glorious history. So it was an appropriate venue to start the Autoglass RAC Historic International Rally of Great Britain. There were 75 entries, including a strong contingent from Scandinavia. This isn't the RAC rally that you know. No thrashing through the forests on this one. This is like an RAC rally of yesteryear, with manoeuvrability tests, with special stages on private land, and a dreadful night navigation section through the mountains of mid-Wales. And I'm alongside my old RAC partner, Roger Clark, in this splendid 1965 Lotus Cortina. You ready for it, Roger? Among all sorts of potent machinery was the oldest car in the event, the 1932 TT replica Fraser Nash, driven by Wiltshire gentleman enthusiast Freddie Giles. On the first test at the Custle-Combe racetrack, my man Roger Clark was firmly in the groove and handled the Lotus just like he did in the swinging 60s. To make life more difficult, the organisers had sprinkled various obstacles around the circuit. For the bigger cars like the Ford Falcon and Volvos, they had to make the most of the open parts, for soon it was back into the obstacle course. 50s Works rally driver Arthur Senior seemed to enjoy the goings-on in his Riley 1.5. And for many, the Nadgery test served as a good warmer-upper and gave everyone something to think about. But there were rumblings of discontent from the Altonans, Clarks and Mackinnons of this world.
I can't say I was impressed with these little tests, and far too tight for the Cortina, certainly.
I think we brought the wrong car.
I think so, yeah.
Because you have all those reversing things, you have to stop in a line and do the reverse and go around the pylons. It doesn't feel like rallying.
Well, we've got to Malvern and we're enjoying it, but we're not doing particularly well. In fact, what we're finding is that some of the bollards and the pylons are rather close together for this car, and we actually did clobber one. We also slid over a finish line at Prescott and lost another 15 points there. Never mind, there's a long way to go.
4, 3, 2, 1.
At the Malvern Showground, Roger was in his element. It was the Clark of old, and we skedaddled over the tiny tarmac tracks in fine style. He made up for his early misdemeanours, drove brilliantly, and beat many of the minis into the bargain. We were starting to climb from our lowly 21st place. The pressure was still well and truly on as the convoy headed west. There was a brief respite as navigators clocked in when the cars crossed into Wales. It takes a special breed to drive open cars into the night, but Freddie and the Fraser Nash was still toddling on and mixing it with much more modern machinery.
Is it a cold job driving in this?
No.
You're not going into the night section in Wales?
Bloody am. Of course we are. That's what it's for, isn't it?
How does this car perform?
Quicker than some minis. You think I'm joking?
The most unlikely car on the event was David McErlane's Ford GT40, looking a little worse for wear, having been thumped by a van on the public road.
You actually closed the main street here in Newtown for the occasion. Anyway, now we're off into Wales for the night section. This is the navigation section where accurate timekeeping and precise map reading is called for, and this is where the very hard work starts for the navigator, so I'm not looking forward to it.
One of the favourites to win this event was the original Flying Finn 1965 RAC rally winner Rauno Aaltonen, with Alec Poole in a Mini Cooper S. But there were extremely ominous sounds in the engine department and things didn't look good. There were troubles too for another 60s rally star, Rosemary Smith from Dublin.
When it's running extremely well, but we had our first disaster at Castlecoombe this morning and it just stopped dead and wouldn't go. And then we had the throttle stick wide open and then we had to stop again. And then we had the petrol pump go. We're just here and we're still going, and that's all I can say.
And we have another mile over the top and then down the Devil's Staircase, the bad hairpins.
So you want to go a bit quick now?
Just a little bit quicker before the Devil's Staircase, yeah. I have been right.
The notorious Devil's Staircase in mid-Wales is bad enough in daylight. In the dark, it's a nightmare. It was one of the regularity sections where cars had to average a strict 30 miles an hour. There were secret checks, and marks could be lost for every second, early or late. It was a demanding business, but reduced the advantage of some of the more powerful cars. Rosemary's Imp was still there, but bringing up the rear. After a few hours' rest, it was back to the proper action. A flat-out blind over the twisting wet Burwerton stage in Shropshire. 2, 1. Works Volvo rally cars were a regular sight of the 60s, but could be something of a handful when the going got muddy, as Phil Edwards ably demonstrated. Although most of Burwerton was flat-to-the-floor stuff, the organisers put in artificial elements to keep the average speed down. All this stopping and starting can be as damaging to a car as the high-speed action. And by night time, back in Bath, mechanical repairs were the order of the day.
So what have you done here?
We are now repairing those things which happened yesterday around 4 o'clock afternoon. We've been running since then on 3 cylinders, and as you see, all 4 are there now.
Great, eh?
Yes.
It's a good job you've got Alec here. What a marvellous navigator.
Oh, fantastic.
Fantastic.
In contrast to modern rallying, where the top teams employ huge armies of mechanics to service the cars at every turn, on this rally, just like the old days, there was little service time, and when there was time, it was the drivers who had to do the work themselves. Like GT40s, E-Types were never rally cars, so had Colin Anderson any problems?
Well, thank goodness with the Jag, not very much at all. We'd no real problems we heard going along. One of the back wheels hadn't got enough grease in the splines that made a bit of a noise, but like the last 3 years in the marathon and now in Clumber, we just keep kicking the tyres.
For Roy and Margaret Hatfield's immaculate Austin Healey 100, this was its first rally outing.
It handles much better than I hoped. Stops, it's a chain. I've got an XK 120 Jaguar and that goes like stink but you've no brakes. It's quite unique to be able to stop. Magic, it's lovely. If you could cook, I'd marry it. But don't tell Margaret.
By the time they reached Plymouth Hoe, Timo Mäkinen was still in the lead. John was creeping up on Mäkinen, but could he beat him on the Hoe?
If I beat him on this, I'll walk straight out across the sea, all right?
In fact, there was no danger of John getting his feet wet as Mäkinen stormed round 13 seconds quicker. These tests suited the Mini down to a T. The surface has changed somewhat since Drake played bowls here. It's actually a diabolical surface for auto tests as the abrasive tarmac prevents the cars sliding. Minis have always been pretty good at this sort of activity, but Roger couldn't get the back end of the Lotus to swing due to a defective handbrake. Nevertheless, we were quite happy as we'd climbed up to 7th place. If the rally went on for another week, we felt we could win it. Saturday night in Torbay, and time for Mr. and Mrs. Bourne to titivate the Morgan. And time for another running report on Rauno's bag of nails.
It sounds a bit better than it did this morning.
It sounds beautiful now. It's just perfect music. But the problem is that this music is coming a bit too late.
Not the best day to be here on the sands at Oddicombe, but this is the last day of the event and now we're in for a quick blast up the hill from the beach. Then it's a speed test on the prom at Paynton, and unless the unthinkable happens, the great Finn Timo Mäkinen will find he's got another pot to polish. He'll finish about 1.25 minutes ahead of the very well-driven MGB of Tony Drong.
Positions didn't change at the top, but Rick and Jane Bourne in their Morgan managed to beat Richard Martin Hurst's Mini by just 1 second to claim 5th place overall.
Team, as we said, did 1 minute and 4 seconds. Number 7, Tony Drawn in the MGB, 1 minute and 5 seconds. That Morgan did very well indeed. The Morgan flashed forward to 61 seconds up the hill. The other times, most of the Cooper...
We were still going at it hammer and tongs, and we duly finished 7th overall, first in class and part of the winning team.
OK, Roger, we're very surprised that you didn't win. Was it his fault?
Oh, partly, I think. But I think we both contributed quite strongly to that.
Oh, yes.
And as if it wasn't wet enough on the seafront at Paignton...
Very good stuff.
Well, Tony Mason there proving that age is no barrier. Now from the historic event to the modern one, it became, of course, the Lombard RAC in 1974, and it's really gone from strength to strength. It's widely regarded as being one of the toughest events in the international calendar. Now, as many of you will know, over the past 3 years, Top Gear has offered ordinary drivers a chance to take part in this very tough international event. It's a bit like a beginner at tennis, I suppose, getting a chance to play McEnroe on the centre court. And all the winners over the past 3 years have said that taking part in the Lombard RAC has been one of the most exciting events in their lives. Winner of the first Rally Quest competition was one Jim Smith from Dundee. He did well on his qualifying events, but on the actual Lombard RAC, he was defeated by the slippery conditions that year. He skidded and ended up, fortunately unhurt, in a lake. The second year's winner was a lady, Armed Secretary Liz Jeffries from Brackley. Top Gear arranged some expert tuition from one of Britain's top rally drivers, Louise Aitken-Walker. After only a few hours training at the wheel of a rally car, Liz got the feel for driving on the loose.
Feel as though you're seated as the car. I often feel the car's driving me and not I'm driving it, but... Good to take the car with a strap in the neck if you're the boss. Swing from the horse. Now! Accelerate! Off! Perfect. Well done.
Liz hit the headlines when, after a determined drive, she actually finished the Lombard RAC, albeit in last place.
Were there any times when you wondered whether you'd done the right thing by entering this competition?
Definitely not. I've loved every minute of it, really have.
For 1990, the contest was broadened to include those who already held competition licences and had rallying experience. Skid control cars and track driving were featured in a tougher selection process, which included this difficult test of car control. Winner was 22-year-old Will Brown, IF engineer and part-time acrobat. Will was of a higher standard than previous winners. He was doing particularly well on the Audi Sport Rally when he tangled with the timber. This on his last event before the Lombard RAC. But like a true pro, when the big event came, he was back in full flight and managed to climb up through the field. He achieved a very creditable 63rd place out of nearly 200 cars on the rally. Well, if you'd like to follow in their footsteps, you'll find an entry form with a few qualifying questions on page 18 of the new Radio Times. That's really all for this week. I'm sorry we couldn't bring you the item on the Detroit Motor Show. It will be in a later programme. Next week I'm at Donington looking at the world's largest collection of historic single-seat racing cars. We've got a road test on the new BMW 3 Series. So see you then. Until then, it's goodbye from the Costa del Torbay.